Welcome to The Reconnect with Carmen LaBerge. We're applying the mind of Christ to the matters of the day so that you can connect the eternal with the everyday and get ready to head out into the world that God so loves in ways that honor Jesus. So let's get started. This is The Reconnect.
Encouraging you to live as an ambassador of God's kingdom in the world.
This is The Reconnect with Carmen LaBerge on Faith Radio.
If we're gonna fly, we fly like eagles, arms out wide. If we're gonna fear, we fear no evil. We will rise. By your power we will go. By your spirit we are bold. If we're gonna stand, we stand as giants. If we're gonna walk, we walk as lions.
Hello, my friend. I want you to think for just a moment about where your feet are planted right now, where in the world you are. We talk every single day about where in the Word you are. But I also want you to think about that place where your feet are planted today. And I want to be sure that you recognize that you are in that place for God's purpose. That He has prepared good works in advance for you to do today, right where you are, wherever that is. God's got the whole world in His hands, and He's got agents of His grace deployed throughout the kingdoms of this world. And so wherever it is that your feet are planted today, that is your mission outpost. Got it? We're going to turn our attention as we #pray the news today. We are going to turn our attention to a patch of dirt called Ceuta. It could be your word of the day. Ceuta, and it could either be an S sound at the beginning or a TH sound at the beginning, Ceuta, depending on the dialect that you are speaking it in. So Ceuta is a city in northern Africa that is technically a part of Spain. And you're saying to yourself, wait a minute, that sounds kind of complex. Yes, this is a complex story. It's about geography, it's about human dignity, and it is about generational geopolitical tension. So the headline would be this. Over the weekend, a wave of 60,000 people migrated from Morocco into Ceuta. And it completely overwhelmed the local authorities. It sparked a major European crisis. It was heavily influenced by a decision by the Spanish Supreme Court a ruling that restricted the immediate deportation of migrants who arrived by sea. And so that was a legal shift. Human trafficking networks very quickly picked up on the shift at the Supreme Court level in Spain and then exploited it, encouraging thousands of people, 60,000 people, to swim across the border. Unsurprisingly, dozens of people died attempting to swim that expanse of the ocean. So you might be saying, wait a second, there's a Spanish city, a city that belongs to Spain, but it's not actually geographically in Spain? Yes. If you look at a map of North Africa, right on the northern tip of Morocco, you'll find a tiny dot. I mean, a dot. And it is spelled Ceuta, pronounced Ceuta. Geographically, it is surrounded by Africa. It borders the Mediterranean Sea. Politically, however, it is Spain. It is a European city, physically not in Europe. It's a unique piece of geography. It's also the epicenter of a humanitarian and political crisis. In the span of 48 hours, 60,000 people swam, scrambled, surged across the border from Morocco into this tiny Spanish enclave. It swelled the city's population by more than 50% in 2 days. It prompted a military deployment by the Spanish military, international political finger-pointing, and most tragically, as we've already noted, the loss of dozens of lives, men, women, children who drowned trying to make the swim. And so there are a number of lenses through which you could look at a headline like this. Our default response should not be to just pick a geopolitical team, to suit up and take a side, but instead to bring the mind of Christ to bear on this particular matter of this particular day. How do you look at Ceuta through a biblical lens? How do you look at a place or a people or a city that's outside of the geographic bounds of its country? I think you have to hold a number of truths in tension at the same time, which, sounds like something Christians are always doing, right? Holding things in tension. We have to hold in tension the reality of human dignity, the precious nature of every single one of these human lives, and the reality of civil order, human order, the ordering of things. God is not a God of chaos. So don't fail to look at the people in the water. We are reminded in Genesis 1:27 that every single human being is made in the image and the likeness of God. And thousands of young Moroccans and sub-Saharan Africans swam into the breakwaters, not as an invasive force, but as people looking for a better life. Image bearers, driven by a desperate desire for a better life. Why are they in the water? This didn't happen spontaneously. 60,000 people didn't spontaneously decide to jump into the water and swim across an international border. It was fueled by human trafficking networks that weaponized, as I have told you, a recent ruling by the Spanish Supreme Court. Wickedness is afoot here. Don't miss that. Proverbs 22:22 reminds us, do not exploit the poor because they are poor. And so as believers, our hearts should break for the families who are now grieving loved ones who died at sea. People who were righteously angry. But let that righteous anger be directed at the predators who were seeking to profit off of human desperation. And then at the same time, we have to hold in tension, recognizing that borders and the rule of law matter. The Apostle Paul in Acts 17 reminds us, God marked out the appointed times in history and the boundaries of lands. Nations have a legitimate God-given responsibility to maintain order, to protect sovereignty, to ensure the safety of their citizens. I mean, you could read Romans 13. So when a city of 84,000 people is suddenly flooded with an additional 60,000 people overnight, the infrastructure collapses, resources vanish, chaos ensues, and true compassion cannot exist in an environment of chaos. So how do we reconcile all of that? I turn to Leviticus 19:34. The foreigner residing among you must be treated as your native born. Love them as yourself. The story of Ceuta isn't just a story about a European city in Africa. I think it's a mirror for each of us as resident aliens and pilgrims and those who recognize that this world is not really our home. It's also a mirror for each of us and all of us as we consider the plight of the least of these, our fellow wayfarers in this generation of humanity. So, as the European Union wrestles with what to do next, I just invite you to pray for leaders who are tasked with creating just and enforceable borders, but let us also pray for Christians who are on the front lines in this city, seeking to care for those who have arrived upon their shores. We could probably turn that lesson to a place closer to home. Our friend Elizabeth Neumann is going to join us next. We are going to take up some national security headlines as well as what's going on globally. You're listening to The Reconnect. Our friend Elizabeth Neumann is back. She is a national security analyst, and she serves in a number of ways, both nationally and in her own community. And we just really appreciate that she joins us here as well on the Reconnect. She is the author of Kingdom of Rage, The Rise of Christian Extremism and the Path Back to Peace. Elizabeth, welcome back to the Reconnect. Hello.
Oh.
Hi.
Are we not hearing each other? Hi.
Well,
I said good morning. I'm sorry.
Hey, good morning. Good morning. I can hear you now. All right. Why are you, or why have you been hanging out with the WNBA?
I have been asking myself this question too, Carmen. Like, I had this moment 10 days ago where I was in Chicago. The WNBA was having their all-star events, and I was a speaker at their Media and Innovation Summit. And all day I was looking around going, how is this my life? This is, I'm a policy wonk. I'm not the cool kid. How am I getting to hang out with the cool kids? So it was kind of a neat experience for me. The company I work for, Moonshot, has been working with the Chicago Sky. That's a WNBA team. And we've been doing threat monitoring protection for them. So I was there to kind of talk about what we had learned. They had a panel called Safe, Seen, and Supported that was focusing on online threats facing girls and female athletes. And one of the things that we know is, well, certainly professional athletes get a ton of hate. It's not just focused on professional athletes, it trickles down. So college athletes get a lot of hate and abuse, especially since they've made all the changes where college athletes can get paid thanks to name, image, and likeness changes. And that's even trickling down to high school now, because high school students, if they want to compete collegiately, are having to post online. They have to post Instagram reels. Did you know this, Carmen? Because I have a high schooler now, and he wants to play in college. I don't know if he will, but like, we're learning all about this process, and you have to be really exposed online in order to get the attention of recruiters. So what's happening at this professional level is trickling down to even to our high schoolers, and it's not okay. So let me give you a couple of the stats that we shared during a WNBA season for one team, just one team. We assessed 1.7 million posts. We identified 35,000 posts that involved potential threats or harms across 8 categories. The categories we look at are things like threats of violence, doxing, stalking or fixation, conspiracy theories, deep fakes, non-consensual intimate imagery. That's a big problem for women, terrorism and harassment. Of those 35,000 posts, we found that 1,200 were serious enough to report immediately, and 269 involved threats of violence that warranted action. 2 of these incidents ended up escalating to law enforcement. One of the things that we helped identify ended up in a prosecution that led to a conviction of stalking. So these are, the volume is massive. That's what makes it a difficult problem. You end up with, a handful of cases that law enforcement have to get involved with, but you're sifting through just massive volumes to find those handful of concerning cases. So that's what we do. The conversation we were having at the WNBA is like helping people understand the nature of this. It's the kind of abuse that female athletes often get has nothing to do with athletic performance. So male athletes often will get that abuse because of gambling. I thought you were going to play better than you played, or officials will get abused because of a bad call. That all of that kind of makes sense in the game context. But female athletes, they get abused whether they're playing, whether they're not playing, whether they won, whether they lost. If they get an endorsement deal, they get abuse. It's just kind of wild the way it shows up for women. It's not just passionate fans. It's a combination of misogyny and racism and grievance and conspiracy theories. And all of this is made worse by AI. It's a very challenging problem that we need to start talking about. And that's part of the reason I was grateful that this guy had this during the All-Star week so that we could surface like this is happening. It's getting worse. The platforms are not doing as well as they used to. We've been working at this type of work for about 3 or 4 years, and platforms have something called terms of service, and they are supposed to take things down that violate their own terms of service. And we are watching them decline in their takedown rates. So over about 5 to 10% each year since 2024, they are removing less and less. So it's a significant accountability gap. And I think there's also maybe a broader conversation for us as a culture, like to reflect on like why is this happening? Now, it's usually a small percentage of people that are responsible for most of the hate online, but we can hold each other accountable. We can, if we watch a friend, talking this way, we can say, hey, that's not cool. Don't post that online, or let's be careful what we're modeling for our kids, even on the sidelines of a high school game, because those kids are going to take what they're watching us do and they're going to put it online. The thing to remember here is athletes are not avatars. They're not characters in a tribal drama. They're human beings. They're made in the image of God. So we need to be able to model. We can enjoy competition. We can talk about the game, disagree about the game, and we can cheer passionately. And you can do all of that without being cruel or dehumanizing. I think that's the boundary line that we as Christians need to hold.
I feel like that this is a new arena for if you see something, say something, because I think that we have learned that if we see something like in real life that looks off, feels off, we have learned like to say something, to report threats around us. And I think increasingly we need to be recognizing that we have a responsibility in any environment that we're in, social media or otherwise. We need to save the evidence, we need to report it to the platform, and we need to contact law enforcement if we really feel like there's an active danger. We need to not, in the same way that I would not engage a threatening person in real life, right? I am also not going to engage a threatening person online. There's a way to do this that I just think we need to adopt a new level of if you see something, say something. And maybe that would be sort of the positive equipping from this conversation to our audience today.
I think that's spot on. It's not dissimilar from being instead of being a bystander, being an upstander. And you're right, you don't want to confront people online. If you have a relationship with the person offline, you might be able to have that conversation and say, hey, the way we conduct our speech matters, and can we do better than what I'm seeing online? But you're absolutely right about documenting and sending to law enforcement. If you see something that's an actual threat of violence, get it to law enforcement, because that can sometimes be the tip that helps them take the protective action necessary to keep somebody safe.
All right, Elizabeth Neumann is going to take up another topic when we come back from a very brief break. Maybe you have heard of the Alien Terrorist Removal Court. Maybe you haven't. The United States has an Alien Terrorist Removal Court, but it's not for aliens from outer space. It's from aliens from across the pond. We're going to take that up next. You're listening to The Reconnect. Hey, I really like it that you listen whenever you want, wherever you are, at all times of the day and night. That is so cool. So thank you so very much for all the ways in which you support this ministry with your prayers and words of encouragement. Right now, in order for this podcast to be available everywhere all the time for everyone, I actually need your help. Could you support this podcast right now so that more people in more places at every hour of every day could hear about Jesus and grow in their relationship with him? Click the link in the show notes or give now at myfaithradio.com. And thank you so much again for listening to this podcast. If people would just slow down and do fewer naughty things, then we could cover more territory with Elizabeth Neumann. But people just keep doing naughty things. And so Elizabeth Neumann, when she comes and talks with us, we can only cover a selective few things that are in the headlines. And so today we are going to talk about the United States Alien Terrorist Removal Court. It is a specialized, highly secretive federal court created by Congress under the Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act of 1996. Its sole purpose is to provide an expedited deportation forum where the federal government can use classified national security evidence to remove non-citizens who are suspected of terrorism without actually sort of like going through the process that normally happens in public. So it's been a so-called zombie court for 30 years. It's just been sitting there dormant. It has now been activated for the very first time in July of 2026 by the Trump administration. So Elizabeth, help us understand what it is, how it's being used. What do we need to know?
So I have a somewhat unusual perspective on this. When I served at DHS, I was a big advocate for using this court. We kept having cases come up. They were specific to ISIS. And the Department of Justice did not want to use this court. And I was like, Congress gave it to us. Why aren't we using it? And I understood, all of the reasons we'll get to in a second, why it needs to be done carefully. But there is a very legitimate need for a court like this. The main reason it was set up is because we often have classified information about why somebody is connected to a terrorist activity. And we can't use that in a public domain because even if we try to use it in a normal court proceeding, because of the rules of discoverability, you would have the defense attorney and the individual being prosecuted would have access to this classified information. If they truly are a national security risk, you don't want the defendant to have access to classified information. So what we would often do, since I clearly did not win that fight while I was there during the first Trump administration, is that we would seek out lower charges. So material support to terrorism was the classic one that often got used, or even lesser charges than that, things that weren't related to terrorism, so that we could have a conviction that would then allow us to do deportation proceedings. But one of the reasons I didn't like that is because it took too long. The judges started to get really nitpicky with us about hey, like it seems like you're beating around the bush here. What's really going on? So they were starting to not give us as much discretion with material support for terrorism. And there were times, honestly, Carmen, that I do not, Department of Homeland Security, my role, I did not oversee investigations, but I would get briefed on cases and it would feel like we were getting way too close to entrapment. And I really did not like that. And there have been other documented cases where the FBI did do entrapment and they get in trouble for that. So I was much more comfortable with the idea that Congress gave us this court for a reason. There are times and places where we sparingly need to use it because it was better than getting too close to the entrapment line or going for lesser charges. So what has happened since, during the Biden administration, they actually revised the rules and we finally were allowed to use this court. So it actually was a Biden administration change, not a Trump administration change. And this is public. And it just so happens that the first case that's being used is during the Trump administration. That does give me a little bit of pause, in part because other areas that the Trump administration has exercised their discretion on immigration, we have seen violations of the rule of law. We have seen multiple courts push back at them and say, you have lost the benefit of the doubt from our perspective because you keep pushing the line. So I'm a little nervous about what is a very important counterterrorism tool being used in an administration that has in the past violated the rule of law. But that's what it actually makes it hard to give you commentary on this. Is this good? Is this bad? I don't know, Carmen. It's a court that's designed to not be public. So it's very hard. I'm kind of trusting that the judge and that the court system, the judiciary system, will do what they are supposed to do, which is be that counterbalance and make sure that the rule of law is applied. I do trust the courts. The nature of this case does seem like it's possible that it's a legitimate case for them to be using the court for. But yes, it makes me slightly uncomfortable that we are now using it in the context. Now, the one thing that I want to point out here, we're not convicting somebody of terrorism, right? We're not having to criminally charge somebody and then prosecute them and convict them for a criminal act. What we are doing is basically, it's more like an immigration court. We're saying there is things that if we could make public, we would criminally charge them for. And because of that, the nature of our immigration laws, the bar is very low. We have a lot of discretion to say who can come in and who can't. And if you are suspected of terrorism at the border, like, we don't have to admit you. So it's basically taking that border authority that we already have, that's been allowed by the courts for over, really since the founding of the country, for 250 years. It's almost 250 years. It is a very strong authority that you don't have a right to come into our country. You have to prove that you're a good person. And what this court is doing is kind of saying, hey, we have enough evidence here to show that you are not somebody we need in this country, and therefore we can remove you. And that's what's happening in this court. So it's a lower burden of proof that is necessary, but it's also not that we're charging them with criminality. They're not going to go to jail on the other side of this. They're just going to get deported.
Mm-hmm. So first of all, your perspective is different than pretty much anything that I have read or heard. And so thank you so much. This is incredibly helpful. And then for those of you who are listening in Minnesota, the chief judge in this court is Joan Erickson, and that individual normally serves as a federal judge in Minnesota. So I'm just saying it's an interesting. Yeah, there's lots of intersections and conversations to have here. All right. We don't have time to talk about the cyber attacks on water systems in up to 7 states, but also including Minnesota. But can I drink the water?
Yeah. Keep your eye on the news. Make sure you're connected to your local alerts. And we should all be prepared, not because of this. It's just a general preparation. You should always have 3 days of water stored. We've been telling people that since 9/11. You should always have spare water in
3
case
days of water, happens. Like jugs of water under the vanity in your bathroom, because you definitely want to be able to fill up the tank in the back of the potty.
There's that too. Yes.
I mean, my 3 days of water supply includes water for the tank in the potty. I'm just saying.
I think that's important. Yes.
We will leave that there. Elizabeth, thank you so much as always for joining us. We so appreciate you.
Thanks, Carmen. Have a great week.
You too. All right. That's Elizabeth Neumann. We'd love to connect you with her and her social media. You can get some good takeaways from her on Substack as well. Her book is Kingdom of Rage, The Rise of Christian Extremism and the Path Back to Peace. But next up, it's back to school. I have this one headline for you. The U.S. Senate Education Committee advanced a bill last Thursday seeking to restore oversight of K through 12 and services for students with disabilities, to retain those at the Department of Education instead of transferring oversight to HHS. It would also, should this bill become law, keep the Office of Post-Secondary Education out of the Department of Labor and the Office of Indian Education from moving over to the Department of the Interior. So lots of conversation still happening at a national level in regards to education, but closer to home, we are all doing our back-to-school shopping. Jessica Glover is going to join us from Kingdom Educators, and we're going to talk about how we can encourage and equip Christian teachers and parents heading into the new school year. That's up next here on The Reconnect. Back to school. It's time to head back to school. So how are you not only preparing yourself and your kids, but how are you praying for Christian teachers and other parents as we head into the new school year? Jessica Glover is joining us from Kingdom Educators. You can find her at kingdomeducators.com. Jessica, welcome to The Reconnect.
Good morning, Carmen. Thank you for having me. This is a pleasure.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have you here. So a couple of resources that we want to highlight for you as you're listening today. Speaking Words of Life in Your Classroom, which is a practical guide for calling students up into their highest potential. And then Grab Your Hope Goggles, which is hope-filled vision for Kingdom Educators. So we'll send you all of those links on the text line. Jessica, why don't you set the stage? Like, share your passion for encouraging and equipping Christian teachers and parents.
Yes. So I was an educator in middle school, said I would never end up there. And finding myself in this place going, oh my goodness, I wanted to be a missionary, but this does not, how do I share the gospel in public education? And thankfully, a mentor came into my life within those first 2 years because we have a big attrition rate in public school, especially since COVID, but back then too, in the early 2000s. And just recognizing, now, wait a second, I am a teacher on mission with Jesus if I carry his very presence into my classroom. So scoot ahead, the Lord invites me into business, if you will. And the one thing that I cannot shake, Carmen, is the fact that Christian teachers need to realize that their partner and friendship with Father God, Jesus, and friend Holy Spirit is what empowers them to do the work they've been called to do, to be that change agent. I feel like when we move into education, we all know it doesn't have a great paycheck. That's not why we go into it. It's because we've got some kind of vision for making a difference. And I feel like it's being connected to God's heart is how we know what that difference is and how to basically make space for God to show up in our classroom spaces, because we really are that change agent in that space to host his presence. And so it's with Kingdom Educators that I have a platform to encourage Christian teachers working in public, private, and some are in homeschool classrooms to carry the very presence of God in that space and to stay connected to the Lord. John 15, that I can't do anything apart from him, that he is the powerhouse and he is the one empowering me to see like he sees and to call out the gold, I like to say, in our students, our children, in what he sees in them, because we all know that they're born with gifts, talents, skills, and abilities to be a gift to this world, but connecting them with Father God's heart. And sometimes we're the only one that touches them to bring that into that space. So that's a big heart behind Kingdom Educator, Carmen. Yeah.
No, that's really good. And I think that even just taking a step back and deep breath and saying again what you said about who the Christian teacher is, like the identity of the teacher who's going to walk into that classroom, that educator and you are a Christian, like you are the curriculum, you are the representative of the kingdom in that particular outpost, like you're it, like this is a game of tag and you're it. So that realizing who you are is just a huge part of this. There's an identity like recognition here that I just think is a huge part of this conversation.
Yeah, it really is. And it's, I think that's actually the biggest thing is how we see ourselves. Am I wrapped in Jesus's very presence? And I'm recognizing like I carry him wherever I go, whether it's in my classroom, down the hallway, in the lunchroom, in front of my colleagues, in the meetings that I go to, that I carry the very presence of God. And something I like to remember, Carmen, is that Mark 9:23, all things are possible for he who believes. So walking into spaces, having sat with Jesus in my home, coming into those spaces going, okay, anything's possible. What does that mean in this situation, God? What does it mean in this lesson? What does it mean in this meeting where they're saying this kid is incapable? What does God think about that? And knowing that his healing work lives inside of me and knowing that there's actually no caps, which that's like crazy talk in public education, right? And so just knowing that the one who brought me to life through salvation, he can do anything in my space if I make room to hear his voice and ask him, Lord, what do you want me to know today? And what do you want me to do? And how do you see me as an ambassador of your kindness, of your goodness in this space?
I'm wondering, Jessica, there's probably people listening right now that it's literally been a lifetime since they've been in a public school classroom. So they're even their frame of reference for this is just very, very different than reality. Talk with us about what that middle school teacher in public school, like what is she walking into?
Yeah, that's a very good question.
What's the mission field look like?
Yes. What does this mission field look like? It looks like a lot of need for classroom management. We since 2020, and I stepped out full time in 2015, but then I started subbing in 2020 after having kids. And our landscape of education has changed so much in the last 10 years. But I would say there's always been the pressure of state and local mandates. So our testing is a big deal in terms of preparing kids to take a test, to perform well. And then when teachers are coming back right now, they're comparing last year's scores to this year's scores, and how did these kids perform and what do they need to grow in? And there's just big pressure depending on which district you are working in. But there's also the interconnection or unconnection within a building. For instance, do people work well together? Do they solve problems? Do the teams actually communicate? There's those pieces. And then we have a lot of children coming from homes where they're either latchkey kids, meaning they come home to an empty home, or their parents aren't. They might be physically present, but they might not be emotionally available to them. And so the teacher then becomes not only a parent to their child, they become the nurse, they become the counselor, and then they carry all of their teaching responsibilities. And then we as believers, Carmen, we're stepping into that space carrying this weight of, I want these kids to encounter the presence of God. Because through me, could they hear the gospel, even if it was without words? Or maybe there's creative ways that I can share through lessons, which I know you've had David Schmus on here from Christian Educators, and he may have shared some of those resources. But that teacher's walking into a situation where there's a lot of things calling at them. And so this is the space where it's like, okay, God, what do I focus on? And that's the constant question, whether someone's walking with Jesus as a teacher or not, it's like, what's going to grab my attention? Do I live by the fire that's I got to put out right now, or is this other thing more important? And prioritizing, that's a huge piece. And so the teacher often goes home. There's many that I talk to that are just, I'm going to be honest, riddled with anxiety because they don't know what to focus on. And there's so many cares and burdens with children that we work with. Like you said, yeah, my middle school classroom, I had kids that were going home to no one home and having to be the parent as a 14-year-old of two other kids, and then dad just got deported. And then I find out the next year that child actually got hit by a drunk driver and died. I mean, there's these heavy things that are happening all the time. And so how do we carry as a teacher, hand those heavies to Jesus? How do we, at the end of the day, unload so that I'm not carrying the weight that I wasn't called to carry, but I'm handing them to the Lord and trusting that he's going to take care of little Susie, what's happening with my principal, what's happening with my colleague that's ignoring me, all those little pieces that happen all day long, super fast. So I hope that helps. Does that give a good picture?
Yeah, I wrote that down as like a list of prayer concerns. Like I want to be praying.
Yeah.
I have a middle school teacher in my life, and I asked her, like, is there a specific day of the week that I could be praying for you? And she said, yeah, Thursday, because by the time I get to Thursday, I think I can't make it another day. Like I just, and so I have her on my top of my prayer list on Thursday mornings. Mm-hmm. And now you've given me some specific ways that I can pray for her. And you're helping me, you're giving me a window into her world. And I think that we think about things like homelessness or mental illness or SNAP benefits or deportations. And we think about those things as cultural issues. But what you're helping me see is the window into the classroom where every single one of those quote unquote cultural issues has a very real impact on a very real kid who's also expected to take very real tests and perform in order that my local school can continue to get either the funding it's getting or more fun or whatever. Like, right. I mean, it's all, it's wound up into a whole. And then we haven't even talked about all of those kids who have what are considered special needs and every student that has an IEP. So maybe we take a brief break and we come back. There is this reality that the kids who are in a public school classroom And I'm not trying to exclude people that are in private schools or in Christian schools or in homeschools, but I do think those environments are a little different. And so I think that when we talk about Christian educators who are not in expressly Christian environments, like they may be the ones that I really just have a heart for today. So every one of you matter as you are teachers and parents getting ready to go back to school. I just have my heart beating a little hard today for those who are Christians who are going to be going into an environment that is not expressly Christian. So we're going to continue our conversation with Jessica Glover here in just a moment. You can check out all the resources at kingdomeducators.com. Couple of resources we're highlighting today: Speaking Words of Life in Your Classroom. It's a practical guide for calling students up into their highest potential. And then also Grab Your Hope Goggles, hope-filled vision for Kingdom Educators. We'll continue our conversation with Jessica here in just a moment. You're listening to The Reconnect.
Psst, have you heard the news? Listening just got better with the new and improved Faith Radio app. No more restrictions, no more static, no more missing your favorite shows. Now, listen when you want, where you want, and share with everyone. When you need hope, encouragement, Jesus, it's right there on your phone. Text the word app to 877-933-2484 and follow the link or search Faith Radio Network in your app store.
As you are preparing to head back to school as an educator, or maybe as a parent, you are preparing your student to head back to school. We want you to do a little mirror work, stand in front of the mirror, recognize who you are and whose you are, recognize the environment that you're going into as a mission field, recognize that you are an agent of God's grace and a minister of his reconciling love in that place, that you carry Christ with you by the power of the Holy Spirit, and that God the Father has prepared good works in advance for you to do. We're talking with Jessica Glover from Kingdom Educators. You can find her and the resources we're talking about at kingdomeducators.com. Jessica, let's talk about these resources. Let's talk about Speaking Words of Life in Your Classroom. What are people going to encounter in this practical guide?
Yeah. So this book specifically was written for my colleagues that were not believers. So you will not find the word Christian or Jesus written in that book at all. It's biblical principles written in a way where anybody could pick it up. Because my heart was really, how do I bring kingdom into public school, but how do I answer these questions that my colleagues are coming to me on? Why does your classroom feel different? And so it is real practical in that there's specific lessons to just grab a hold of and adjust to your grade level. So whether you're teaching kinder or you're all the way up in high school, being able to start your kids out with a simple exercise on, well, where did our names come from? Because identity, like we said earlier, Carmen, is really a big crux of what I do. Like, what does it mean for me as the teacher to understand who I am as a kingdom person? But also our kids, they come with unique identities that God has given them. And I like to start in a simple way with them taking a look at the etymology of the meaning of their name. And of course, we need to be careful with this because we have kids coming from foster homes and adoption and things. So they might not know like their full family stories. And I give some ideas of how to do that. And then we move into making declarations over ourselves. And so what that looks like in my middle school classroom was a lot of grumbling. I would have kids stand up and I would put up on the screen a list of like declarations of based on scriptural truth. Like I'm an agent of change, born to do great things. And I watch what goes in and out of my body, talking about words, but also the food we put in our body. And so we would talk about, and there's like 20 different declarations that we would say over ourselves. And I'd start with just a couple and we'd talk about what they meant. And kids would share, I would provide space for them to talk about which one of these don't feel true today? And then we would talk about what they meant, and I would ask the Lord to guide me in the conversation. And you can do that too. And then there's some other lessons on how do we take those declarations and turn them into a full classroom management program? How do I remind kids on the fly of like, hey, how do you behave like the meaning of your name? So I'm going to give an example. Lauren, we looked up her name. It means laurel wreath. And as a 12-year-old, she burst into tears. What does that even mean? I don't have any meaning of my name. And I'm like, no, wait a second. And thank you, Lord. You were like, came really quick and reminded me, a laurel wreath is what the winning horse wins at the end of the race. We put it around the horse's neck. So you are a winner. So we would take the name plate and write her name on there. Lauren, she's a winner. So in a situation where Lauren is finding herself fighting or being mean with someone, I can come up to her and whisper in her ear, Lauren, how do you behave like your name? Oh, I'm a winner. How do I behave like a winner? So it's helping to cultivate in kids, that book, the whole point is helping to cultivate in them, like, who am I? And how can I live to this higher call of like my actions, my belief about myself actually impacts the world around me. And I've even had kids come back and say, hey, this afternoon I was playing with so-and-so and I reminded them what their name means. And this is what's important about them. And I got really excited. So I'm like, oh my gosh, they're sharing it. Or like telling my mom and dad. And so we can take these principles in our classrooms and teach them, like, basically, how does God see me in a very simple way, and teach them how they start to take it elsewhere, after
It's so
school,
good.
at home.
Yeah, I mean, it's really so good. I think that there a lot of us, like, nobody ever taught us how, like, classroom management. When you even use that language, like, we can't imagine like how you would get from where you are now to a place where students recognize their strengths, they honor one another, they have a sense of belonging and purpose.
Yeah.
That identity and respect are actually the groundwork from which we're gonna grow together. So it's so positive and it's so encouraging. If you're listening right now, Speaking Words of Life in Your Classroom, a practical guide for calling students up into their highest potential, certainly written from a Christian worldview. It's totally reliant on Scripture. However, it's written in such a way that you could give this to a public school teacher who may not be a Christian, but who recognizes the need to have better classroom management and wants his or her students to thrive. So kingdomeducators.com is the website. Jessica Glover, our guest today, one of the resources that we're highlighting, Speaking Words of Life in Your Classroom, a practical guide for calling students up into their highest potential. We'll also send you a link to grab your Hope Goggles, Hope-Filled Vision for Kingdom Educators, all of that on the text line 877-933-2484. Jessica, thank you so much for joining us today on the Reconnect.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, what a delight. All right, my friends, we are almost out of time for today. I mean, how did our time go so fast today? So I want to be faithful to do what I promised Ressie yesterday I would do, and that is to encourage you with these words. Expect always the unexpected and anticipate miracles, knowing that with God all things are possible. And then I want you to put yourself in a posture of receptivity for the blessing. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you his peace. I want you to get into the Word of God today. I want you to take God at his word. And I would love it if you would spend some time doing a little word for word in the Word of God. Our Growing Your Faith verses of the day from Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. Have a great day, and God bless. Thanks for listening to The Reconnect with Carmen LaBerge. Let us know how we can help you more fully reconnect the eternal with the everyday. We want to walk with you throughout your journey of discipleship, so let's connect. You can text us at 877-933-2484 or connect with us online at myfaithradio.com and on all our social media. I look forward to connecting with you as we each seek to reconnect the eternal with the everyday.